You were driving. The time kept getting longer. It's a
pretty good time.
Yeah, well, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. We've got a small crowd tonight, and welcome anyone online who happens to be online. Did people have a chance to review the minutes? Any additions or corrections? Yeah, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the July 10th, 2024 board meeting minutes.
Second. Okay. All in favor? Aye.
And before you go,
Yes.
I need to write that down. That was Ann Nance was first, and then Betsy.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And do we have any members of the public?
No.
Online?
No.
Or okay. So spend through public comments for tonight. All right. Todd, do you want to introduce our first education piece?
Yes.
Which I'm
excited to hear about. Very excited. So Ray, you're up.
Yeah.
So last year, 2023 in April, Ray Fennewald came to us to talk about the Walking and Walkability grant. And we had a lot of discussion about that. The board approved accepting the grant. And very excited to have Ray back to tell us what happened, because we have run through the grant cycle. So I will turn it over to you. And you other.
All right. Thanks, Todd. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Do you guys see a presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay.
I think we're seeing, there you go.
Yeah. That's good.
Part of your present, your notes are coming up on the side.
Oh, they're coming up on the side. Oh, okay. Here we go. Is that better?
There you go.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. I know I have 10 minutes, so I'll go ahead and start my timer. Well, thanks again for giving me this time to talk about something that has been a big part of my life this past year, and something I really have a deep passion for. So the way I want to start this update is with an email that I recently got from a participant of one of the walking groups that I lead today. And it says, I'd like to say how grateful I am to have found this walk. I honestly do not see or talk to humans, but for gas and groceries. Single, no family, friends, worked 8 years full time from a home in a call center. Thanks for doing this. Tuesdays make me happy now. Tuesdays also make me really happy because I get to see her every week. So these are the kind of warm and happy feelings that, I've been feeling with these walking groups, but I'm going to back up a little bit and chat about how we got there. And that is with when the OSU School of Nursing recruited DPL to join. It's called the Rural Libraries and Walking Study. Now, they reached out to 20 libraries across the state of Oregon to participate in starting walking groups. There are two types of walking groups that they created, essentially. So one of them is called the Step It Up Club, and that is a purely walking-based walking group. And when I say walking groups, it's everybody. The idea is everybody gets together at the same time and walks, like 30 minutes to 40 minutes, and we all get back together and we stretch and chat. So it's really like a social and fitness group as well. The second, the other 10 libraries that are part of the study is the Change Club. So they're also doing walking groups, but at the very end, they've implemented a civic component. Now, what the researchers hypothesize is that the groups that that incorporated a civic component would result in better health outcomes. So that is what the study is. Now, my involvement with the OHSU study is the following. So From February to May 2023, I was responsible for the recruitment of the participants. I started with 20 and I think I ended up with about 18. From May 2023 to November 2023, I was responsible for leading the walks. So I led a weekly walk for 6 months. And then at that time, I turned it over to one of the participants in the study to continue leading the walks for the next year and a half, which is the duration of the rest of the study. And throughout the duration of the 2 years, I'm responsible for working with the researchers for data collection. So one half of the data collection is actually getting health measurements, weight, height, blood tests of the participants over time to see if the walking group is helping with the health aspects. And then there's also a qualitative aspect too, where they do surveys. And we do those in the building. We were actually doing them at the Redmond temporary location. So that really is a SparkNotes version of the OHSU study. And for the OHSU study, like Todd mentioned, we did get $5,000 to use toward that walking group or any other way. And I'll talk a little bit more about how I was able to use some of those funds. First, I just want to show you a picture of the walking group. This is them. They named themselves the Redmond Roamers. And these are the cool shirts that they wore. And I think on the specific day, they actually just wore them all but on coincidence. So that's why we took that picture. And this is in Quartz Park. Really, really nice park. Oh, there's supposed to be another picture right there. Okay, well, as I said, after 6 months, I wasn't leading these weekly walking groups anymore, but I really had this great momentum. You know, I learned how to lead these walking groups and I wanted to continue doing them because I saw firsthand how they impacted the community in many ways. And for me, this really fits into results policies number 3, which I know you guys know probably like the back of your hand, but I think it really goes to the first part here where all residents find safe and welcoming places to meet and interact and to engage in individual pursuits. So it really does fall so nicely in what we're trying to do as a library. So the pictures that I have here, the top one is a Redmond walking group that I did in partnership with the Redmond Senior Center. That was a really fun one because the groups were right after the community dining, and we would go to different cafes all over Redmond. I think we went to every single cafe. And there was supposed to be a picture down below, but that one was of the Lapine. The Lapine walking group. And that one really came out of the what happened with Lapine and when we had to pivot and go to the temporary location at the Lapine Senior Center. I thought doing this walking group was a way to be able to still provide services and programmings to a community that lost that physical space at that time. So this is actually at the new renovated Lapine, where you guys are at right now. Okay, so for the last 5 minutes here, I just wanted to share some key observations that I've kind of noticed between the study aspect of walking groups and then the DPL walking groups that I created after implementing the first ones. I'm going to talk a little bit about positive health outcomes for participants and myself. I'm going to talk a little bit more about connection to DPL between the participants, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've been seeing about attendance numbers and how that relates to recruitment and incentives. So I'm going to go ahead and start with positive health outcomes. So one thing I noticed in both the groups, and this is just from my own 2 eyes, is that by offering these groups weekly or biweekly for in some cases of the DPL groups, participants were able to form a new habit, a new healthy habit. And this is something that for some didn't have before. I know to be part of the study, you actually had to move your body at, I think, under 2 times a week. So some folks are going from completely sedentary to being able to move, 5,000 steps to walk for an hour every week. So, they're building new habits. For for some of the participants, this is their only form of exercise. I know for one of the gentlemen in my Lapine walking group, he was a teacher, and he was really hard on his body and on his voice and on his limbs just from standing and working with teenagers all day. And he really uses this time to move. And then another way that we are able to continue is buying Fitbits, and which is what I spent some of the grant money on. And there's many, many more, but what I'm trying to get at here is that with the study, we're actually going to be able to get quantitative data about how walking groups will affect health outcomes, and that will come in late 2025. One thing I also noticed is that library-led walking groups deepens connections with the library and the community. By walking with participants, I'm able to share interesting library events, getting to know them, and getting to know their interest in sharing library events. Because of that, they're also more connected to the community in general. Me as a community librarian, I'm going to a lot of events out in the community, ribbon cuttings, um, things like that. And I'm able to invite some of the participants to come with me. And then they're also using library resources more because I know so much about them. And when I hear that there's a need, I can talk to them on our walk about it. And I think there's a quote here from a customer. It says, "I absolutely love coming to the Redmond Library, even if I have to drive up Highway 97. I always get treated in a respectful and kind way, no matter what my question is or experience. You all are super awesome." So that was really nice. Here's some photos. What was really nice is that I think in February there was the Library Lovers Week, and I told the Redmond Roamers about it, and they all participated and got their mug. So that's them in the temporary location. Okay, so this last thing that I noticed, this key observation, is that as much as I love doing these and they're so great, we're just not getting the numbers as the same numbers that we got by doing the study. Now, to me, I can attribute these to a couple things with DPL participants, because these are open programs where anybody can come and do it. There's for my rocking programs, I don't have a registration. DPL participants are not recruited, and they're not signing consent forms, and they're not part of a study. So there's really less skin in the game. And because of that, I'm sorry, I'm going a little bit over time. There is less group cohesion, less repeat attendance, and that's really where the magic happens. So in the future, I'm experimenting with different formatting, with incentivizing, and I still have a little bit of that grant money left to be able to do that. I would also love to do some type of media piece. Michael did a really great one that I want to be able to share a little bit more. You can go on YouTube and check that out if you're interested. These are the wonderful folks that keep me going and experimenting with different formats. These are some members of the Bloodline Group. And that is it. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing.
I think you missed something. Can we talk about romance?
I was wondering where to fit that into there. Yes.
We want details.
Well, what Todd is alluding to is actually at that coffee walking group. Two members that didn't know each other met on these walks, and we were going to cafes, and they actually met and fell in love, started a relationship. And I haven't caught up with them in a while, but they actually are dating because of the Redmond Senior Center coffee walks. So
Oh, that's great.
yeah.
Any questions about the program?
I'm curious what the bulk of the funds was spent on. I heard the Fitbits, but was there something else?
Yes. Probably about $1,000 was spent on advertising at the Redmond Senior Center for recruitment purposes. And then I also spent about another 1,000 on Stanley mugs as incentives for to get more members for the Lapine walking group. So we have so that's about 3,000, I think, spent. So we have a little bit more. We have about 2,000 to continue spending for these walking.
Fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was wondering in talking to, have you talked to other libraries that participated in this study, and have they seen any? Have you had any early indication of differences between the two types of walking groups yet? The one
Yeah,
with component versus.
I don't have as much information between the two types of walking groups. When we were meeting with other libraries, it was libraries within our own cohort. So I was meeting with other librarians that were part of the Step It Up walking group. So I don't have any answers about that, but but I have some some I have some, I know what some of the other librarians are doing, but we haven't had those meetings in about 6 months, so I'm not sure
Okay.
where they're at. Yeah.
Any other questions?
What time of day are these groups meeting and what demographics are you mostly reaching? You said the senior group or the senior center. What other demographics are you connecting with?
Mainly seniors is the main demographic. The other in La Pine, I actually had some young mothers with children in their strollers. So that's the other type. Mainly it's retirees. The groups are on a weekday, usually in the morning before it gets really hot. And then the Redmond Senior Center one was around 12 o'clock, right after their lunchtime.
Well, thank you very much for that presentation. It's sometimes we don't always get the after when when we hear about a program. It's really nice to hear the results of this one because it sounds like it had some really beneficial effects. So thank you for all that hard work.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
And I will definitely send you a link from the video. It's very inspiring.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is an ongoing program.
Yeah, she's kind of alluding to, she started doing some with staff. Started walking from downtown. Has hit some smoke days, so that's throwing it off a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, I saw a recent advertisement for a promo for it. I can't remember where I saw it, but it sounded, like a lot of fun. And beneficial, so. Okay, we're on to bond updates, so Greg. Are you ready for this? All right, good.
Oh, and a couple of things. I gave you all this extra sheet. These are the budget numbers from before the changes that are in this new report, so that you have something to compare to when Greg is talking about budget changes that are coming up. And then have I talked about why we gave you all notepads?
No.
Our goal with that was help out speakers when they're presenting, that we can take notes and then save our questions for later, that kind of things up. So that's why we did that. One of those secret things we do that I never told you.
Right, exactly.
Connected, because I was looking at it on mine. The webcam and central, and thought, wow, that'd be kind of cool to share. I thought I'd share it here. Yes. So this is our webcam up on the central library. And it's live, and so this is where it is today, but since the report went out, they completed all of those concrete walls. For the section of building slab, it's kind of right there in the middle, and stood all of those columns this week. And they have been prepping those columns over on the side for the last few weeks, receiving them and assembling steel to wood and getting them ready. And they're really starting to make real progress. you know, one of the things in this, from the schedule standpoint, was that we secured our full and final building permits, right at the, 1st of August, right after I sent out the report. It came in as approved and we got it paid and pulled that. So they're really just off to the races. Are the subcontractors that are really involved in building out the framing contractor and the structural steel sub, both mobilized in at the end of July, have full crews on site. And they are taking deliveries of material almost daily now. Columns, beams, the ALDT wood floor system, all the structural steel that's supporting. There's actually, the steel guy has been working for 2 weeks on the inside of that concrete shaft inside there. It's completely, there's a whole structural floor beam system and metal decking all in, which was needed to take down bracing for the walls. It helps to make it rigid and to where it's self-supporting. So I saw this online and I was just checking to see how they were doing, and I thought, wow, this would be kind of cool to show you guys what's going on. The other thing that's happening out there that you can't see, that's right behind it, is, you know, on the developer's property. And then in the report, I put in some of the videos they shared about what they were doing. And DR Horton is their home builder out there. And I think there may have been one house framed up in the video I sent you. There's now like 8 or 9 going up in the air. And when you look out there, the number of slabs that are pouring, they're just really cranking. So, you know, the whole idea is, hey, when we're ready to open up, there's going to be a lot of home sites built out, families moving in and living there. And so there's a lot of energy. The 27th Street, you know, they tore it up. We built bypass, or they built the bypass, and they are on track to have that completed here at the end of the fall. I think they're shooting for November to have it done and reopen 27th Street. And that's one of the conditions of approval, is it has to be open. Well, it's a year ahead of us. So just some real positive schedule news. You know, I think overall the schedule is moving along fine. Up at Sun River, we're opening tomorrow, maybe.
Probably next week on Monday. Yeah, I was there today. There's a little bit more that we need to work with to get it organized for collection signage. There's a little more cleaning that needs to be done. So we have our cleaning person, our cleaning service. He was in there today. He wants to do like a full day tomorrow. And the staff just got some new equipment that they're getting accustomed to. So there's no hurry. Tuesday, 10 o'clock. That's going to go up on the website.
So that's very exciting. Redmond is marching right along. The shelving system's going in. We received the first shipments of the AMH, the automated material handling system. So that arrived, and they're going to be, the installers are coming in next week to start installing that. Kirby's wrapping up some stuff. One of the things we're doing in discussions with our landscape architect is holding off on the planting of all of our landscape materials. Just they really pushed us to wait if we can. And Kirby's talked to the city, and the city said, yeah, we'll give you a TCO to go in and stop building and operate until you plant the plants, but holding off to wait until temperatures are more favorable. And the best time to plant is, you know, early mid-September on into October before it freezes, but trying to avoid some of this heat. So we're making some adjustments to our schedule there. We've got some other work going on, but it's flowing really well right now.
The sign went up.
What's that?
The sign went up.
Yes.
I saw it yesterday.
Yes. Yeah, we have signs up, and there's a lot of things, you know, the fence is down and you can walk on the site. People want to go and look at it. Stuff. It's generally pretty respected, staying out of the construction zones, but I think after hours at night, they're visiting us and looking into the windows. So Mark, I did get a few phone calls. Oh, somebody visited you last night. One of the probably biggest things that the report was our budget analysis. You know, we really spent literally the last about 3 months going through all of our budgets, cost estimates, and where we're at on that. And went through to analyze where are we at? What do we know? Locked in firm pricing, under contract. What are our forecasts of what we need? Because as we're, you know, wrapping up the branches, and Redmond is coming down to where we're really have a good sense of where we're at on that and how that's going to finish up. We set the GMP on Central, which was, you know, that one cost alone was 1/3 of our overall bond program. And so we really took an evaluation of what is the financial risk of the bond program? What do we see is necessary for each of the individual projects? You know, with the starting of downtown, we started that design process early. We've been through a lot of design and cost estimating to where we have a much better idea where that's going and what kind of funds we're going to need. And decision-making on a lot of alternates and systems, especially around the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But, you know, all of these things have been in play for the last few months. And really wanted to look at budget to say, okay, what do we need in my opinion to finish? And how does that compare? So one of the very first things that we have in our budget is funding. And if you noticed, funding actually went down and project costs went down by about $2 million. And that's really based on, well, what do we need? And so we wanted to be able to say to the board, to DPL, here's what I think we need. And so you'll see, we said if we don't sell the land, lot 2 at Stevens Ranch at this time, and we utilize those funds. That was something we put into the budget when we had to move from Roble to Stevens. And at that time we said, wow, we may be short money and may have to do things to help pay for costs. And today, I don't think we're going to need to do that. And so that was, you know, we wanted to say to DP on the board, you have a choice. You don't have to sell this. We're not asking you to raise those funds to pay for the work that you want done. Same with our grants and donations. You know, they've been busy working right way through, generating a lot of great donations, getting the grants and those. And so I looked at it and said, well, we have a target. What do we have today? If we didn't get another dollar, what does that mean? Well, it told me, okay, we're still in good shape. You don't have to raise more to pay what I think we need today. And so it was really to kind of say, can we pull that down? The other thing that increased in sources was our interest income, which continues to rise. That was almost just under $1 million increase there, $900 some thousand, where that went up. And we had another update from the arbitrage attorney who evaluated the earnings that we had actually achieved through the end of May and gave us some updated reports as late as July here. Where are we at on all of our earnings from the investments in the LGIP account, and then what do they think our current liability is for having to pay funds back to federal government for those. And so that's all factored in here. And so while that fund is continuing to rise, and we can't really stop it other than take the money out of interest-bearing accounts, which, you know, most of them are long-term investments that Robert has managed with his team. And so that's really not going to change as we go forward. So that's why you see a reduction, and partly was because you'll see costs also went down, and that was looking at, so when with Central, or actually before you get there. The general administrative budget, that one went up by about $500,000 now. So there's two major components of that budget. One is the owner's representative fees in there, and the other is the collection that the district is going to buy. We have a few other smaller accounts in there that were things that were done early on during the bond program, creating the bond, costs that are already spent, and legal fees and general accounting fees for auditors. So those are costs that are in there. For, as your owner's representative, you know, we bill on a monthly basis based on our contract, and we haven't adjusted our contract or our estimate since we moved from Lowell to the Stevens Ranch location. In part, there wasn't like a urgent need from a billing standpoint to do it, and it was really, as I continue to look at where we at on the schedule, where we at on the budget, I would plan for that. So we adjusted with the new master development schedule to bring that up front. And that's about a 9-month impact. The other piece that changed in there is we brought on board a FF&E and move management project manager 2-3 years ago, early on, really handled it. And we had anticipated their workload being at a certain level of time, and it's really proven out that the amount of time that person needs to spend, her name is Chris, was really needed to be increased. And so we discussed that with EPL and what her role is and what her time is. And so that's also a component. And there's a separate approval authorization. I'll go through that a little bit more, but that's the first big increase. There is about $500,000. The next one was the work package 1 central library. So that budget overall went down by a little over $2.5 million. And then as you can see, there's things that changed. That one, I was carrying dollars for real estate fees for selling the lot 2. Not selling it means they don't need to pay a real estate agent, and that was $100,000 or so. The hard costs, construction costs, there's about $200,000 that increased, and it was for grading work that we had done through the developer up front. And I just had it in a different category because it was a cost we had with the developer. I wanted it in the hard cost area, so I moved it and put it in there. The FF&E costs, it was minor, it's about $50,000 change, and it's just, we went through and got really updated pricing on all of the FF&E major components. So the early learning components, the shelving, the furniture, and all of those, and the artwork. Netted out to be 50,000. Some went up, some went down, some were, you know, almost washing out each other. So it was a small net increase, but we really evaluated all of it. And as we looked at like art, one of the things I looked at is that we've been estimating how much money should we spend on the art program based on the 1%. And I had tied it mainly to the construction cost, but I re-looked at it and said probably needs to be tied more to the development costs, that we're spending 1% of our investment in a property on that. So it made some of the art budgets go up, some stayed static because I had them a little high anyway. But we made some adjustments. That was something I did with Chantal and the art committee of where they at and what were they doing, and do we have the right amounts planned to cover everything that they want to do. And so we reassessed all of them, you know, and that's one that sometimes you kind of just forget about it over there when you're focused on building buildings. But we really wanted to make sure we were capturing all of the potential costs of the full development. The big savings was in soft costs, $2.5 million there. So our estimate on our permit fees and our systems development charges, SDC fees, were substantially lower than we had originally established. One of the things that benefited us was looking at how they utilize certain tables in the building code to assess property values in order to assess the fees based on those. And sometimes when you build a building that has upgrades and certain qualities, it doesn't increase your permit fees because your permit fees are driven off of these tables. And so there were some benefits that we really saw come through, that our fees were not as high as we had originally anticipated. You know, we looked at everything through the soft costs. There's a lot of components in there. Verifying where our insurance was relative to the schedule and what we purchased, and make sure that, hey, we have to extend it and whatnot. We have those forecasted utility fees. So we have our permanent electric power at the job site now. So how many of you remember we had to bring power all the way from the substation off of Rickard Road all the way in, and that whole system got built, completed, and we're now running our temporary power off of the permanent system. And so had some conversations with CEC that because they're a cooperative and we're a part of it, is whatever they actually spend, they send us a bill for it. And so I anticipated those kinds of costs in here, as really went through and looked at all of them. The project contingency, I rounded it down, 74,000. I took it to a nice even round number. When you look at it, it's like 4.5, 6.5. So that is really looking at, based on the commitments we have and the confidence in the GMP, how confident are we in the level of contingency? And I would say we're going into construction with a really sound, conservative contingency level for the project. We don't have current big exposures that we're worried about, or big changes that we're thinking of. We have changes and adjustments to things as we go through, but nothing that's like, oh yeah, go spend $3-4 million, right? It's the 10,000, 100,000 kind of things that fit within these budgets. So that was one of the big ones, as you can see, that really helped to bring down costs, to say, okay, believe we need more money, and what affected the sources. Downtown Bend went the reverse way. It went up, you know, almost $1.8 million. And that's really driven off of, we did a lot of evaluation and analysis of all of the MEP systems. So the mechanical system, the plumbing, the electrical system. And there's a lot of older components there. And some of them have a certain amount of life left in them. But when we said, okay, but are they going to last 25 plus years? So they looked at like the electrical switch here. It works, it's functioning, it's okay. Would it last 25 years? Probably not. And so the district would be back in a position of having to deal with it maybe in 10 or 15 years. The other is that manufacturer is no longer building parts and components for that gear because it's old enough that they are not going to. And so if it does break, you have to actually go to try and find parts that were already made and are sitting on somebody's shelves, or rebuilt parts and refurbished. And so that was one of those major components. The chiller for the HVAC system, it's a big component, sits up on the roof and helps to dissipate. But that was another big component that we said, okay, what is its life? Because our engineers were looking at it, trying to keep from spending money, trying to reuse it. And it was very much in the same position. And we've identified probably half a dozen or more of those kinds of things that we haven't changed what the building is going to look like, and the interiors and the use and how it's laid out, but we're really changing the support systems that are going to, you know, help manage and run the building. we're doing a little bit more with window replacement and some of our roofing components. We did a lot of analysis of both of those systems of where have been leaks, where do we think there's exposure, what's the condition. A lot of joints, caulk joints in systems get used a lot and they wear out over time. So that's something, one of the things that we really looked at and said, okay, there's some things that need to be done. So that's what's driven this up. A little bit on inflation, you know, that we've seen as Kirby did their last cost estimate for us and really looked at where do they think we are today and where do they think it's going to be at the end, because, you know, we're still estimating the project that gets built in 27, finished in 27. And so next year we will be buying it out next fall, so a year from now, to build it following year. And so we feel confident and comfortable with the estimate, but that was the big change in that project. There was some things that were small in there, some due diligence costs, some surveying. The real big thing was increasing the hard costs, FF&E. Same thing, we evaluated those cost estimates, and we have a really good comparison with Redmond because of the size and the similarity of parts and pieces and stuff. It wasn't a big change, mostly a little bit where I increased some inflation factors on that one. The soft cost budget, again, minor changes throughout, just looking at where we at, where do I think we might spend some money. So not a lot of big things there. And then we did reduce the contingency level on, or excuse me, looked at the wrong one. It was reduced by, that one remained unchanged, sorry. On the Redmond Library, that when that overall budget came down, contingency came down. There was the hard cost came down, which is the construction cost, and it's really based on, I had this $51,000 sitting in the budget line item, and the GMP is really sound. Kirby has enough funds in there to deal with the changes that we're implementing, deal with conditions that we're facing as we finish up. And so we're not expecting to have to increase their GMP as we go forward. So I peeled those dollars out and don't need to leave them sitting there in a line item when we don't need to use them. The FF&E increased. And this was just updating all of those forecasts. Our budget here went up some. I think it was definitely a little bit lower than what we had planned, so it went up a bit, but it's really kind of based on early learning shelving and are all having small adjustments, so that went up a little bit. The soft cost budget, again, minor changes. Then the contingency level was reduced by 800,000, and so it offset some of the increases in the other categories and then generated the savings. And what it really, when I looked at it, I said, well, with the confidence level we have in the costs that are all under contract, how much contingency do we need to plan for? So that's what brought some of that down. I just don't see us needing to say, okay, we need a lot. We're still carrying a contingency for unforeseens, or as we get, you know, DPL says, hey, we realize we want to do this or do that, that there's money set aside for Redmond, but it's trying to right size the contingency based on the project's needs and forecasts. Work package 4, very similar. You know, one of the big reductions was the elimination of East Bend costs, and so that affected every category because we backed those out. We had reduced them prior, but then after the June board meeting, when it was decided not to move forward, I reduced all of the remaining costs. And so you can see some of those came out. We really looked at where we at with SunWest. So as we created the work packages, we created a single contract with SunWest for all of the branches. And we'll close that contract as a single contract. We're working with them right now to wrap up. And so I did make some adjustments there based on what we were doing at Sun River primarily, a little bit at the branches, just small things that we're having them do and work on. And, I do see that kind of looking that we'll close Redmond's contract with Kirby and then Sun West contract on the branches probably closer to the end of this year. You know, a lot of them will be finalized, but we'll be carrying a few open items, but it really helped us to get to a point of saying, okay, we have a good sense of where we at and what we need to finish. Because again, I reduced that contingency down as well by $500,000, and it's still carrying about $500,000 in contingency there. And feeling confident that that is more than ample funds. You know, when you look at the contingency budget that is in your packet there, the current combined contingency is still just over $17 million. And that's what's allocated to the 4 work packages, the administrative costs, and our reserve fund, which is over and above on top of all of that, which that reserve contingency is just under $5 million at 4.8. So overall, we're at 7.61% contingency, which to me at this stage is a very healthy contingency. If we were anywhere under 5%, it'd start to get a little tight. You know, aggressive developers will be pushing, you know, down to the 3 and 4% kind of range, but they take a lot of risk. And so when the public knowledge, I can manage this. So that's how we got to those numbers. And where it sits on that. The other components of the report, really, there hasn't been a lot of significant changes. You know, design wise, we're marching through, finishing up some stuff on central around the shelving design, around the furniture, and our early learning, those components. Like I said, we pulled our permit, and so from the building standpoint, we're just going and dealing with issues as they may pop up, and no real big things per se there. The most active design work, of course, is with Downtown Bend. We finished the DD, design development phase, and so we're doing a final evaluation of those documents and reviewing them. Cost estimate as well is going on, so that is progressing well within our schedule because we finished design and permitting long before we start construction. How it's talking about it simple. So I don't know if there's other questions about the reports. Maybe
I have a question about downtown. I know it's just starting into all that, but given the problems that they found in Bend Auditorium, which was rather shocking, do they go in and do an engineering assessment on all the construction components? Because it is an older building.
Yeah, so we actually did a number of evaluations in there. It goes back a long time ago where DPL hired a consultant to go in and evaluate condition of the buildings prior to the start of the bond program, which helped give basis for Miller Hall and the design team members to know what to do. Since we brought them on board, both the design team and our CMGC, Kirby, have gone in and done separate evaluations of the building, and they look at the obvious, what they can see. Can they see anything that looks like it's, you know, not performing well, whether it's cracks or breaks or stuff, you know. So it's been very much a visual inspection by them. That includes our structural engineer, the architects, both Steel Architects and Miller Hall's teams have gone in and done different evaluation, and then Kirby with their team have gone in, and it's literally crawling up into the ceiling spaces, going into the non-visible areas to the general public and looking at what are they seeing, what's the condition. Our window or envelope consultant, and they look at came out and they evaluated all of the roofing systems, and all of the window and curtain wall systems. And so what they're looking for there is water intrusion and the performance of the skin relative to water and air. But that also signals, hey, is when you get water leaks, how does that affect the building structure? It's not a direct correlation, but if you see those kinds of problems, then you start digging a little bit deeper. A portion of the structure is very visible to the design team and the contractor to see, you know, especially the second floor where the roof versus second floor, which is sandwiched in there. I would say that I think we have a good assessment of it right now, but that when we truly get into the demo, and which is what happened there at the high school, is when they got out there and they started looking at it, there they found cracks in their trusses that was like, this is an emergency, get everybody out of the building because it could fall all the time. I don't think that we're seeing anything of that nature, you know, current evaluations, and so we're not expecting to deal with those. But that's the extent we've done today. So it's truly a visual inspection.
And if they visually see anything, then they'll send some structural engineers with equipment to start testing.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
This building is also a lot newer than Ben Auditorium was, so that's some.
Yeah, because I think Ben, did I hear in the 50s? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's quite
about a 70-year-old building as compared to about 25 on the downtown. You know, I think building codes definitely they continue to get more stringent, restrictive, and require a lot more level of factor of safety today than they did, you know, as you progress back. They never seem to get anything easier. It's a little tough. And as they
based on experience, right?
It is. It's, you know, when the buildings that collapsed here because of the snow loads, the huge change in the building code there on how to design those structures, those roof structures in particular for that snow load. And the amount of resistance that they had to have and what the factors of safety and how they, when they engineer it, you know, how tight can they cut to the minimum design. You know, I would say we are probably not designing to minimums anywhere, but to really good sound practices. Because sometimes it's like, yes, there's a minimum, but here's what is the right thing to do. And, you know, structural engineers take that very seriously because they are stamping it, putting their signature on those plans, just like the architect.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I really appreciate all the work that went into the analysis of downtown Bend and the mechanical systems and the care that's been exercised for each of the buildings, because that was one of the things that we told the public is these are 25-year-old buildings and we want them to be useful for many years into the future. So I mean, that just makes perfect sense to get everything set up for decades into the future instead of saying, well, we can get by with this or that. I mean, I really appreciate that work. And then I had a question about Lot 2. When that plat was submitted, that was platted as a separate lot, correct? So in the future, if we were to want to sell that lot, it's all set up and ready to go for that. But I think that's a discussion for the board to have at a later date to say, you know, when the dust kind of settles from all this construction, what is our intent and what do we want to use that property for, or do we want to sell it, or, you know, I think that's
Yes, I think that was our thinking is, we didn't make this change because we have some plan in mind. It was more of,
Right,
it's going to be better for us to wait to see what's the impact of our building, what's the impact of all the building around us,
right.
and the board will have much more information to make a good decision about what to do with that property in a couple of years.
Yeah, it's only gonna get more valuable, so,
Yeah.
it's nice to know that we don't have to
Exactly.
take action right now.
And so everybody remembers that we had to buy that whole piece of property. The developer wouldn't sell it, because once we said, well, sell us this much over here. They said, no, it's this much. Do you want to buy it or not? We said, yes, we want to buy it. And then we said, okay, we can get by with this much. And it was really, at one point we were looking at saying, wow, we have $10 million+ hit to the budget when we had to move from roll over. So we tighten the screws down and say, okay, let's build out what we have to of that lot. So, and then created that separately.
Any other questions for Greg? I appreciate you leading us through that in such detail, because it's a lot of detail,
Yeah.
and the rationale that you presented for the changes was very clear, so I appreciate it. So, I don't think we need to take any action on that, but we're going into our next things on Mill Hall.
Yes, this is just updating, as we go through with Miller Hall's contract. We have to make design changes for us as we go through it. Some of these can be $2,000 and some can be, $30,000. And generally we track all of them on a time basis so that we are paying for their actual hours. Because sometimes it's hard for them to say, oh, here's a fixed fee for this. And so periodically I go through and update where are we at on each of these, bring them up current. And then we've done these updates as we've gone the last year or so. And as we wrapped up the last two change orders, 11 and 12, those were ones that they're listed on the summary page 2, that are just multiple small changes combined. And what was forecasted the last time we did an update to the authorization and brought it up. When we got all of the final tally, you can see it was $2,500 negative there in that bold, which says I went over $2,500 on the authorization right as we got those finalized. So then I looked at, well, what do we have coming up that would have a potential cost impact on their contract? And we've got a couple things that we're working on, some signage stuff that we're having them do Redmond support, and that's just our sign designer working with DPL and really fine tuning our signage. The central flooring revisions, we're really looking at what we're doing with certain flooring components there based on performance that we're seeing in other buildings and what looks good and is really going to fit and be a good long-term solution. So I know there's a couple exposures and then just a general authorization for some additional support as we go forward. And so that's the 80,000. It's really not set for any one thing, but for whatever may pop up on any of the work packages, in the coming months. We don't have a lot of things that we're thinking of. We're going to do a few shelving changes as we fine tune our shelving. And, I think we continue to learn how the shelving works with the new shapes that we're using and how they fit and how people can maneuver in and around with strollers and other stuff. You hear from the staff what it's like for customers to really maneuver and where we can modify and make them better. So I think that will be going on until we finished down to the bed. Because it's a very dynamic process, and it's what the library does, right? The most important thing is the shelves. Inside it holds all of our product. So we'll have some of that. But that's really what it's at. So it's increasing the authorization level by $100,000. Any questions?
Any questions for Greg? I entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion on there to provide the library director signing authority for Noah Hall's contract and change order total not to exceed $17,840,000.
Here a second.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, early learning.
Yeah, so this one is on Central Library. Within the fabrication costs, which we have not awarded yet to Figure Plan, they've given us an estimate, it's within our budget and everything. One of the components that Figure Plan does, it's called technical design. And it's really where they take from plus and greater than pretty pictures and the ideas and their level of drawings, and they go figure out how do they build it, because these are all custom unique pieces that aren't buildings, but play structures, play elements, things that are going on. And so what we're doing is advancing them the cost for the technical design and some funds for doing prototypes to build components to test it out. And that is one of the things that we've learned, is that we're trying to do a lot more testing of the components and stuff as much as we can before it gets deployed to the floor. And just to see how they're working. Some of the, like the carts, the electronics, the dance and plays and those, they have to go through a period of figuring out what's working, what's not. And even when they put it out there, there's a couple of things where the kids come up and they broke the buttons in the first couple hours, I think, on one of them. And they figured, okay, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Got to go back. So this is advancing those funds. It's in the budget. And what it will let us do is to have a better sense of the design and design costs. So when we set their final contract amount for Central and award it, it's going to be based on more definitive information. In the past, we had them do the technical design after we set the budget. And as we worked and talked with Figure Plan about how could we improve the process, this was one of them. They said, if you let us do technical design, our numbers are going to be tighter on when we price it, because we're going to know what's working and how we're going to build it. So it lets them advance that. And so that's what this request is for.
Any questions? Okay, I entertain a motion.
Sure, I'll do that. I move to provide the library director signing up to $150,000 for the early learning Fabricator Central Library technical design and prototype services.
I'll second. Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Okay.
So third one is the amendment for our contract as owner's representative. And there's a spreadsheet that is pages 3 and 4. And it's kind of a continuation of where we started on the base contract when we amended our contract under change order 1 and then change order 2, which was for the extension of our contract timeline first, and also then separately adding in the FF&E manager. So I've been trying to just keep showing how it's changing. One of the things that we looked at, in big picture, it increases our contract, I think, $788,000. The budget if you recall, was a $500,000 change, and that was in part because we had anticipated and forecasted a big portion of that increase, knowing that our schedule was moving out. The big change that really kind of drove why that difference was when we increased the FF&E manager's scope of work. And you can see that under the kind of the, not the first right column, but second to the right, from the right, under FF&E manager change order 3, that was about 428,000 of that 788. And then the other amount, 360, was the adjustment to our contract, the construction project management and development project management. We evaluated how we are staffing our projects. So some of the amount per month really fluctuates some. And it's, so this year, through the end of this year, is our highest staffing level. As we finish up Redmond and wrap up the branches, then in January it steps down because some of our staff will be coming off. We are not going to need as much. And so that would have to do with early on, we were going to be more stacked, more vertically with the projects, and with the time extension, it's kind of spread those out. And so we tried to really look at what was the time increase, but also what was the staffing needs in putting these together. Basically followed same cost criteria that we set our contract up with as we move forward on how much per month and what percentage of people. So that's the adjustment. And I don't know if there's questions about any of that.
So this is essentially an increase to 5,663,000 from 5,588,000. Is that correct?
Yeah, the budget that's currently set in the updated budget for our line item is at 5,588,000, which there's a $75,000 difference. And one of the things that we looked at is that this takes our contract through March of 2027. March of 2027 is when Downtown Bend is completed and opened. As we go through like the whole year while we're building Downtown Bend, we're closing out a lot of the bond measure stuff. Central will close out most of that unless there's added changes and stuff. The branches in Redmond, to where then we get down to the end, and ultimately we have to close everybody's contracts and wrap them up. And what our recommendation to the DPO was that, hey, let's budget about 3 months at a much lower fee. So there's dollars, the 75,000 is in the budget, 3 months at 25,000 to help do final closeout of the bond. So that's why there's a difference between what our contract amount would be and what the budget is that increment. And that's something that during, as we get closer to the end, is to look at and say, how much support does DPL still need to help close the bond? What will they be doing internally themselves with, bond counsel and some of that? There's a point where our services aren't going to be needed, really, that Robert and Todd and the team will be able to cover it. So, so that's the variance between those two numbers.
Right. Any other questions? I would entertain a motion.
I'm able to provide the library director signing up to $5,663,000 for the contract and change orders for owners representative services.
Okay. You have a second? Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, thank you, Greg.
Absolutely.
That's a lot of progress there.
Yes. it's a really good feeling to be at right now, you know, from my view of looking at it and, you know, having a level of confidence where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to do things. We had a question pop up in the meeting this week about a budget, and I was able to confidently say, yes, you have money to do that if you want to do that. And making some adjustments to shelving. So always feels good.
Yes, no, it's such a complicated process to balance what's the risk that is reduced through time and then the risk that is increased through time. The more unknowns and fewer unknowns.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you for keeping this track of that for us. Okay. We have an education component here from Sara.
Yeah.
You want to introduce
yes.
that, Todd?
So we we are operating on a strategic operations plan. The year we started, Sara will tell you because I completely blanked it out. But we're coming up to near the end of it. But the last 2 Augusts, Sara has come and given the board an update on the progress. So I thought this would be a great time to do that again this year. Just a heads up that yes, we will be working on a new strategic plan. Kind of the big component that we want to start with is I'm looking at the board for support with that. So starting to work sessions, and we're working with Margot Halpan, is to start thinking, starting at the top level. What does the board want? Looking at your results policies, and we'll start working with that to start building our next strategic plan. So
that strategic plan will be a 10-year beyond. Yes.
The last one we did was a 3-year. We usually 3 to 5 years. We recommend, because beyond that, we start speculating. Wow. About what will happen. So yeah.
And I think we're going to turn to Margot for some guidance on how we should proceed through this as a board so that we're reviewing the right things before we get to the point of engaging on the plan aspects. And
yeah.
I think it's a really exciting opportunity with new board members to all participate in this process. So
okay, Sara, you're up.
Okay, excellent. Testing audio. Thumbs up if you can hear me. Got it. Thank you. Well, I can see my giant face there on your screen, so I'm going to share my screen so we can minimize that because no one needs to see that. All right. Got my screen here?
yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. I know that Todd, I think it was earlier in the week, sent out what was presented last year. Hopefully you had a chance to take a look at that, or if you have that just as reference, because there was a lot that was accomplished in our first year. And we are continuing to accomplish a lot, but it definitely is just kind of compiling, right? And I just did not include what we have already done in the past because we wouldn't have enough space on the slide. So I'm going to take you through the last 12 months of the strategic plan. What have we accomplished? What are we currently working on? And then what do we know for sure are future activities? And know that the future activity list is kind of never ending, but these are things that we've identified that are going to be those most, newest next steps that we're going to focus on. A quick overview, refresher, or introduction for some of our new board members, by the way. Nice to meet you virtually. I'll meet you in person, I'm sure, at some point. Our strategic operations plan, we identified 5 main strategic goals, and that was design, construct, remodel the buildings. I know that you're very familiar with that. We have create a culture of trust, and that's internally among our staff members. Prioritize equity, diversity, and inclusion throughout the whole organization. Reimagine the organization model, and that has a lot to do with those buildings because we're going to need some new staff and new positions. And then engage with the community and really what can we do to support the community. The objectives are listed on here. I'm not going to read through those, but essentially it's going to give you a little bit of information on, what does that mean? And then, of course, I'm sure Todd could always provide, if you want a refresher on it, the full strategic plan document that then goes into each of these strategic goals has activities underneath them that the management team has been looking at with staff, and that's where the activity comes from.
Yeah, as a reminder, that plan is in your board manual.
Thank you. Okay, so yeah, there's a detail that helps us kind of guide us to making sure we're engaging in the right activity to achieve these goals. And we're just going to look at some of that activity now. So the first goal, we talked about that design, construct, and remodel buildings. You are, again, very familiar with this. Over the last 12 months, remember, we're just looking back from now until last August, we've got these 2 accomplishments, which doesn't seem like a lot, but they're huge, which was operating temporary locations in Sisters Lapine and Sun River, and that was a giant lift throughout the whole organization. And then in that same time, reopening those locations. So I just think taking a look back at the last 12 months, there's a lot that was done to make that happen. We are obviously working on construction of Redmond and Central libraries now, and then our future would be to open those new libraries and then start with that remodel of downtown Bend. Pretty quick overview of that one. You're very familiar with that. I'm going to move to the next one unless somebody has a thought on that. Okay. So create a culture of trust. One of the things that we did over the last 12 months is we did host and facilitate our first staff day in, I think it was like at least 3 or 4 years, Todd, if I don't have that, or I think I have that correct, 3 or 4 years at least, in which we brought all staff together in one building and had some activities. It was a really great opportunity to get together. What that did was it kicked off the idea of we need to do this more often. We heard from staff that it was really important to get together and share ideas and just collaborate and be together as a group. So what came out of that were these all staff in-service days, in which we hosted our first one in April, and we have continued every single month through the entire year. I'll give you a little bit more information about that towards the end, because that's where a lot of this work has happened that actually kind of flows through every single one of these goals. So that's accomplished. In progress, we are working on internal communication best practices, and then a brand new system and intranet to roll out to staff, which has been a big haul. That's something that staff are really looking forward to, better connections with each other. And then, of course, the future would be implementing those best practices, the system, and we are also going to be launching an employee engagement survey towards the end of the month. And the engagement survey is where we get a lot of fantastic ideas and information on what do we need to focus on to increase engagement, but a lot of that then goes back to the strategic plan so that we can figure out where do we need to put our time and energy and resources to not only support staff, but the organization. So we're doing that for trust. When we look at prioritizing equity, diversity, and inclusion, this has been a big lift over the last 12 months. I know that the board has gone through some training. What we did was we planned out training for all staff, and we launched that training for all staff back in April. And it is at least a 3-year plan. It's a big undertaking, and that includes online courses that staff are taking, and then twice a year we're getting together at those in-services and having discussions around that training. So it is not a one and done, but we're really looking at this longevity and making sure that everybody has the knowledge that they need. The in-progress pieces that really flow into this are working on developing a new customer service standard and training. And I don't know if Mayra's there, but I know she's been leading this with Sara Thompson, and there's a lot of work there. There is going to start to be some work on increasing Latino engagement and getting staff together to really focus on that and figure out how we can better serve the population. And then we have also continued some executive coaching at the leadership team level. And there have been some cohorts that have gone along with that and really increasing the EDI. So then the future piece that is closest is really taking those customer service standards through that equity, diversity, and inclusion lens, and getting staff trained and starting to implement that. So that's going to be like the next step once everything is developed. All right, and then we have reimagine the organization model. Doesn't look like a lot, but I will tell you that the group that worked on this worked tirelessly throughout many, many months and ultimately came up with a model that was reviewed and approved and said, we know in the future we're going to have all these buildings, we're going to have brand new positions like maker spaces. How can we staff, how can we support our community, not only in the buildings, but then with all of the outside projects that we're working on. So that was approved, which was a huge, huge undertaking and was really exciting because it's now allowing us today, in the last few weeks, in the future weeks, we are going to be hiring all of these new positions. And we have started that and it's been going really well. And so it's kind of exciting to bring on some new people and get some new positions going. And in the future, we still have on here, it was on last time, the idea of stay interviews, which essentially, instead of waiting to survey somebody and talk with somebody about why did you decide to leave, we want to work towards having those conversations, maybe on an annual basis with staff that says, what's keeping you working here? You know, what do you really enjoy? What can I do to better support you? And so that's kind of the idea of stay interviews. And once we have a little bit of a time to breathe, we'll be able to implement that as we go through with the engagement survey and kind of building that trust that I mentioned earlier. All right, and then the last goal was engage with the community, which is a very big picture piece. There's so many things that are not even represented on here that are happening. But ultimately, the big accomplishment is we started to have some partner presentations at library board meetings. I heard that went really well. We want to continue that to kind of bridge that gap and have that communication. In progress, there's a lot of ongoing things that you'll see here. So listening sessions, we've got community partnership relationships that are going. Summer with the library programming was a huge success and it's just been going great. We had that limited series podcast. We have social media campaigns and emails and newsletters, the Latino Engagement Committee. There's so many things going on. So this is just very high level. And then in the future, there will be this Festival of Voices. That sounds like a really amazing opportunity and event happening in September. And I also put in here the new customer service standards, because although that's something that, you know, as staff members, these are the standards for us. When we go and implement that, it's going to raise this connection, relationship, and ability to serve our customers. So really that is something that goes across multiple goals and why it's listed here. All right. I mentioned in-service days, and I just want to share two things with you. This is going to be the goals of the program, and then I want to give you just a high-level look at what has been accomplished so far. So in-service, actually, let me ask, are you guys familiar with in-service? I can't remember if you've been presented with that idea or how.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay,
Yes.
good. So as you know, it has streamlined our closures. We've been able to communicate more efficiently with our staff, giving them trainings, mixed group discussions, and then just bringing everybody together on a regular basis. Prior to this, we had monthly Zoom meetings, which were pretty brief, 30 to 40 minutes, but it wasn't a lot of interaction time. It was really just us kind of giving information. So this has been a really great two-way communication piece. And this is what we've accomplished since April. And there's been a lot going on. So in April, we kicked off equity, diversity, inclusion. We had some training on early literacy, collection philosophies. We even had some fire safety training where we got the volunteer firemen over and we put out fires literally in the alley, which was really fun. That led us into May, where we started talking about open enrollment. We talked about summer with the library. Todd did a really great presentation of the bond measure history and timeline, what led us to where we are today, which is going to help us understand why we're doing what we're doing in the future. In June, we started looking at the future of all these spaces. You can kind of see we're trying to build on some of the messaging. We had the opportunity now to get everybody together for our annual sexual harassment training. We had a great presentation on library history and racism, really setting the foundation again of this is what's going on now and here's what we're going to do to move forward and just kind of continue the momentum that we have and really open up to the community. In July, we looked at meeting room and policies. We've got a lot of changes for those that go along with all the buildings, intellectual freedom and barriers. And then we started to talk about the point of need service model, which I think you might be hearing about later. And then in August, so just recently, this was last week, was our second time coming together to talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion. We got a preview into what this beautiful sorting machine is going to do, which was really fun, and starting to think about how that's going to, affect and allow us to do other things in our positions. Library of Things, which was awesome. Everybody got to get creative and start thinking about different ways we can bring new materials to our community through the Library of Things program. And then starting to look at those customer service standards that I mentioned earlier through those goals. It was bringing a draft to staff and really getting their input and being able to have that open conversation. And then preview for next month, we will be looking at internal communications and also merchandising and displays with a lot of hands-on activity. And again, just getting staff engaged and being a part of the process and not just us saying, here's what's, going to be going on. We want them to be engaged in the strategic plan to help us accomplish it. So that was a lot of information, and I know that there's a lot going on today in your meeting. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if you have any questions.
Does anybody have questions for Sara?
Great plan.
Yeah. Comments? Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I mean, that is a huge body of work for, in any one of those one areas is a lot of work, and then combined, it's a lot of progress. And I love the fact that you're coming to us annually so that we can see progress on this plan. So it isn't just a piece of paper that goes on the shelf and nothing moves forward. We've really established a great foundation here and kind of a launch pad for the future as well. So thank you.
I'm assuming that each goal had its own little committee that worked on it. How many people worked on all of this?
It'd be hard to count.
Yeah, all we can just put all. Some of the initiatives, customer service, internal communications, where there's a need for collaboration, and it's going to be a big work project where you're going to need kind of a project manager, but input. We've put together groups with representation throughout the organization. And so like I'm leading the communication one, and I've got a group of people that we just met earlier today to discuss it. And that's on top of their, regular job. So everything that you saw is multiple people.
Right.
I like the fact that you're engaging, as you said, everybody. It's not just targeted, it's everybody. That's great.
Yeah.
And I love, it's always a tension between taking the time out you need to do internal work versus being open for the public. And it's a hard decision to close the library one day a month, because I'm sure it's not popular. And it's always a concern, but it sounds like the work that you're doing is so important, and being able to bring the staff together after COVID and after all the hires where I'm sure people had never met each other in person. And so that sense of cohesiveness and increasing the communication is like fantastic. As far, and in addition to shared learning around topics, I mean, I don't think there's any substitute for that. So it's great work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sara.
All right. Have a good evening, everybody. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Okay. We've got Jennifer up next on the annual employee turnover report.
Okay, and Jennifer, our human resource manager, she gave a similar presentation last year. And so just thought this would be a nice way to update you on where we are. And it also helps, this one helps inform our management practices report, which I'll be giving in a minute. So you're up, Jennifer.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Todd. Thank you, everybody. Little deja vu here. So glad we're back again for this conversation. And so I'm just going to jump right in and with a little bit of a review for some of our newer folks. We look at turnover because turnover is one of the tools to help us identify where we are as an organization in terms of engagement and stability. It's not the only factor, but it is very important. And so we do track this on a monthly and annual basis. And so the information that I'm going to be presenting to you today represents the most recent budget year. So July 1 of 23 through June 30 of 24. So first off, just want to break down what is an employee turnover rate. And that is defined as the percentage of employees who leave an organization during a certain period of time. And that will include reasons such as voluntary resignations, dismissals, non-certifications, which doesn't apply to our organization, and retirements in their turnover calculations. It doesn't normally include things like internal promotions, transfers, or anything that kind of happens once somebody's already in the door. And it's really a metric of effectiveness of the human resources management system and really the overall management of an organization. So there's a little math involved, just going to warn everybody up front. In terms of how it's calculated, I set forth a formula up here just so that you can see, how we arrive at the information I'll be presenting here on subsequent slides. So you can just see that it's expressed as a percentage, number of employees who left divided by the beginning and the ending number of employees. And we get our overall percentage. So if you have 45 employees at the start of the year and 55 at the end and 5 employees left during the year, your annual turnover rate would be calculated using the bottom example, and you'd have a turnover rate of 10%. So that's consistent with the process that we use. So just a few facts here in terms of the library's turnover rates. In this last budget year, 10 employees voluntarily departed DPL, which we calculated at an 8.1% turnover rate. Just for purposes of comparison, according to Mercer, that keeps these types of statistics, the 2023 national turnover rate, all businesses calculation, was right around a 17.3%. At DPL, all of our employment separations were voluntary. Right now, we are hovering about at 101 in terms of staff headcount. We have several what we call full-time equivalency designations, or FTEs in HR lingo. But all of our staff are either full-time, 32 hours, or 24. So that's calculated to a 0.6, 0.8, or 1.0 FTE. And when we roll that all together, we have a 92.8 full-time equivalency amongst those 101 individuals. So throughout this last budget year, there was a rolling headcount of 108 individuals who were actively employed throughout the budget year. And we had 8 employees who were hired at DPL during the last budget year. So that's, I think, just in terms of putting this into perspective, DPL has a pretty good turnover in that it is a pretty small number. Other areas or industries may have much higher turnover and lower retention. Historically, DPL has had a pretty significantly low turnover rate. So this last year kind of trends with our overall experience in that area. One of the areas that we look at to help manage turnover is retention. And I'm going to sort of echo some of the things that Sara shared with us. And that is, what do we do to help retain our internal talent? So we have implemented the use of pay differentials for niche skill sets. For example, bilingual English-Spanish skill. We apply an additional pay differential above base salary. Same with somebody coming in with a American Sign Language skill. Cost of living adjustment. We have within our collective bargaining agreement what's called a collar, which is a minimum 3%, maximum 5% cost of living adjustment on an annual basis during the 22-26 contract period. And again, this helps kind of trend with Central Oregon cost of living, which is fairly significant. We also do, as Sara mentioned, employee engagement surveys approximately every 2 years. And we pay attention to those follow-up priorities. As Sara mentioned, the next survey launches on August 19th. An introduction of new positions, also the Org Reimagined group. I was on that group. I can attest to the level of investment that committee made, and what that outcome of that is reflective of some new positions we haven't had before and some additional career and skill pathways that are now available to internal staff that were not present in past years. We've also maintained staff education and skill development opportunities. We have a very robust relationship through what's called the Public Sector Partner Group, and that is a consortium of districts and agencies in Deschutes County that partner with COCC to provide niche skill and development training to our public sector employees. The last couple of years, we have really made deep investments in soft skill development at all levels, but specifically within leadership as well. It is important to note that strong and authentic leadership is a key component of retention and trust building within an organization. And so DPL has put quite a bit of time and resources into that area. We offer interview training. So individuals who might want to brush up their skills for an internal interview opportunity can work with our HR team to develop those skills. And we also provide some career coaching support if somebody wants to kind of figure out how to go about their next steps. We've also continued to focus on our equity, diversity, and inclusion work. We want to make sure that we're a truly representative organization and welcoming and connecting with the people that we both serve and who we want to work with us. And then finally, I've also included our monthly in-service training, which has also given an opportunity for all district information share so that we can strive to help people remain connected and understanding of how they fit within the big picture of the organization. So with that, that's the report for this year, and I would love to take some questions.
I have a question. I was wondering how many employees have taken advantage of the interview training?
We don't count, but I would say it's enough to make it relevant. I probably several per year. I would say maybe 5 or 6 at any given opportunity.
And you said these numbers, this rate is about on par with previous years.
Yes, I would say that, and I didn't prepare our comparative data, but I did look at it, and I would say there's no bubbles. So looking back to 2018, that number has remained a fairly stable, no surprises.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, that was really informative. Thank you, Jane. That leads us right into our next monitoring report. But thank you for that information. We appreciate it. God, you want to talk about management practices?
Yes. So I have the report for you to review, so I'm not going to go step by step. I think the highlights are one of the last two things we heard really kind of feed into this. The one thing we didn't talk about a lot, but the Employee Advisory Committee is also a very powerful component that we've added, which really makes a nice connection with staff. We rotate people every year onto that committee, and I go to all those meetings, so it's a great way for me to get direct connection with staff. And the biggest takeaway I've taken from that is just that ability to have somebody say, what about this, whatever it may be, and just to get an honest answer from us about, yeah, what if either some of the things you're saying are things that we're struggling with, or here's how we came up with that decision, which I'm finding to be much more effective than, what we're doing during COVID, which is we'll put out a blog and say, here's what we're doing, and we miss all the nuance. And then also hearing from me, each time we have a different manager sit in with me as well. Sara Brang leads those. It's a great way just to see what are the impacts of some of the decisions we're making, or something we may think that seems pretty simple, and then hearing, well, here's how it's impacting us on the ground. And it's really helped us change. That's a big piece that helped us start doing the monthly in-service, where we really saw, especially with all the changes we have coming with the new buildings, that we really needed to get in front of staff and have these really big discussions about the why of what we're doing. So anyway, that's kind of a neat piece that we've added this year.
Todd, how many people participate in the committee or on the committee?
On the committee, there are, how many? I think there are about 5.
5 to 6.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And what's their method for transmitting the information that they get from you in the committee?
We take minutes, and they're available for everybody. Yeah, and we really designed it so that each person is there to represent themselves. Like they're not there to represent the 10 people they work with, but really just to get really direct questions, because we have other methods for that. We have a union, we have, and then we're very careful about being selective about coverage across the district, so that we make sure we have representatives around the district. It's not all 6 people from one department. Yeah. And that, I don't think I have, other than a lot of talk about our employee handbook and the things we do around that. Really, my conclusion with this report is that we are in compliance with the management practices and executive nomination policy. And I'll hear any questions.
Did we have any grievances this year?
Do we have any grievances this year? We had a grievance. It was a collective one from the union regarding our point of service model, which we're about to hear of. And interestingly enough, the way those work is that it goes to directly to a manager, and then if they don't like that answer, it goes to the director, and then it goes to the board. And this grievance went to a manager. We gave a response, and then it went to me. And kind of my lesson from the employee engagement survey is I actually contacted the union and said, I can give you I'm gonna give you my answer in writing. I have to give you my answer in writing, but I'd really like to meet with you because it's more nuanced than this. So Chantal and I met with the union and really talked about what we were trying to accomplish, what we wanted to hear, what some of the concerns were that staff had. And I think that was really effective. That was it. You know, we said we like to try it before we knock it down. And they dropped their grievance at that point. And we still, as with everything, we have work to do to prove what we're doing. But I think it was a very effective discussion that we had. Again, just kind of taking out that intimidation of, well, us versus saying we have to do this, and really having more of a dialogue. Mm-hmm. And that was the only grievance we had this year. So, yeah.
Any other questions? I would entertain a motion on management practices monitoring.
I move that the library is in compliance with the executive limitations policy 3.
A second. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. And passes unanimously. Do people want to take a quick break?
I was gonna say it.
Yeah, and then we can really pay more attention to the point of service presentation. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break. Be back at 7:27.
Okay, so for those who are online, we'll be back at 7:27, and I will pause the recording. Audio and video. Okay.
Okay.
We're back.
We're back. In process. So we have another education piece, very timely, on point of service models. So could you let us in on all the ins and outs?
And as another hint, I am also this kind of leading into our next monitoring report, which is treatment of library customers. So we'll turn it over to Mayra.
All right, Mayra.
Thank you all. And I will say that Brang and Jennifer actually very beautifully queued up half of the things we're going to talk about.
Right.
So I'm just riding on the coattails of two very talented individuals. Thank you guys and Todd for the opportunity to come talk to you all about our point of need service model. I think we hear so many updates from Greg and just with all of our managers that come in to talk about the buildings. But selfishly, I really always want to talk about the service in the buildings. And also outside of them, there's a little bit of a hint there. But so I am so grateful. Hopefully, I can answer as many questions as you have, but I'm just going to dive right in. This is the topic I love to talk about most. And I'm going to give you all a preview of one of our in-services, as Sara mentioned. We had a really big library history session hosted by Catherine Jasper, who walked us through the last 200 years of United States libraries. And all the wonderful things that libraries have done, there are also some horrific and really difficult things to cope with that our field has done as well. I think it was a reminder for us to look in the mirror and say we should constantly be growing and auditing ourselves and really trying to find out, is the practice we're doing or the practices we're doing serving us still? And if it's serving us, what about our community? And so this was a fair reminder, and one of the big takeaways that all of our staff took with them is the following slide, where really we talk about historically, a library has served as a gatekeeping organization, as a protector of physical assets. But over the last 200 years, we've really seen an evolution and shift from gatekeeper and protector to connector, where our most valuable assets are the people that we serve and the relationships that we build off of those, and truly being more connection focused. One of the things I want to highlight here is in that shift from gatekeeper to protector over the last 200 years, we've also witnessed where library is posed as the ultimate third space or as the community living room. And before I lecture you all on something you all very much know a lot about, one of the things that is very unique to libraries is in this day and age, we are finding that they are kind of the last free third space. If we think about third spaces, a person's home away from home outside of work and school, you've got bars and cafes, and those places are exciting, but they also charge and they're a business, and we are 100% for we're not for profit, and want to give away all the amazing services and things that we have. And so for us, DPL, keeping that goal in mind of being the community living room and also being the connecting community living room is what led us to decide to really look at how we deliver service. So we are doing so much work with our physical buildings, but now it's time to look at the philosophies behind what we do in those buildings and outside of them. So I'd like to introduce to you all what we are calling our point of need service model. And the objective is to create a service model where both the community and staff and the customer themselves have the flexibility to meet each other at the customer's point of need. There's a couple things that come along with this. The real concept behind it is that we don't wait for customers to come to us. We are taking the initiative to go to them first, make sure that they feel welcome, and then we physically meet them or socially or emotionally meet them where they are or where they need. So it is a thing about looking beyond what has served us and looking at what could possibly serve someone who maybe has been harmed in the past, or someone who just doesn't know what a library offers, because we do find that all the time. We have countless times where people come in and they say, oh, you get to read all day. Not quite, we are a lot busier than that. I'm still waiting for that job. Lynn is my direct supervisor, and I told her she's failing me on that. I have never not been busy in a library. And so I think there's clearly a place for us to open up and give dialogue for what we do and how we do it. So like I said, we are starting to look at the physicality of how we deliver service, but also the belief systems behind how we deliver service. And then again, with physicality, it's the physicality of both our staff and the customers as they approach us. And with needs, it is again, the historical need and the current need and the harm that could happen if we don't assess how we deliver it. So the beautiful part is that inherently as a library, we're a research organization, so we don't do anything halfway. We are very thorough. And so we did spend a lot of time researching a couple different things. One, we went as far back to research what are the power dynamics that exist in a library? And truly, when you have access to information and you are a protector or a gatekeeper of it, you truly aren't holding that power with the responsibility of sharing it with everybody. And so one, it does shift away from protector to connector to you, the point of need service model. We found some really good research. And one of the best quotes that I found from a researcher that worked on a project through OCLC, he did a study of three libraries, 2 were public, 1 was academic. And his direct quote from there is, a customer told him, in the point of need model or libraries that deliver it, it's also called roving reference or different kinds of models, the library user no longer feels like an interloper. So, and I think that's super powerful because it means our traditional way of delivering service makes customers feel isolated or like they are guests in the house and not community members in our living room together. And so to us, that's a really, at least to me, you know, I'll speak for DPL as a whole right now. It's so much important to create a relationship where someone feels as if they're welcome and they belong and they own the space together because they are part of your community and not like they are guests who have to maintain every single formality. So a couple other results that come out of some of the findings in the research we found is that you get a much more relationship-centered library, you get a more user need-centered library, and ultimately the big push that I think DPL is going for is moving away from feeling as if us library staff or us, our board or our leaders own the library, and instead the community owns it together because we all collaborate to create a space for everybody. So again, clearly you can see this is probably the reason I wake up every morning is to deliver service like this. I do want to talk and take a step back at DPL's road to this because it has not just been something that happened with the bond. It's been a lot before, there's been a lot of work towards it before the bond. So we started looking at within the last roughly 15 to 20 years. And back in 2007, our fearless leader, Todd, tried a Redmond library pilot. And I feel that being director, he gets to be poked and prodded at a little bit. It failed. And the reason for that is technology wasn't quite there. Todd can share all his experience, but we had our staff on heavy tablets, they're like 4 pounds each. Technology wasn't there. Our brains were, and the point of need service model or roving reference models were there in their mentality, but the access to tools to meet people where they were at just wasn't quite there. So afterwards, from 2010 to about 2016, we started then working on our practices, knowing that the technology needed to catch up. And I have to just really give a shout out for what forethought was happening there. We can say with confidence, the technology wasn't there, but our mindset was. We started working on escort reference and model reference, which was finding ways to connect with the customer, finding ways to take them where they need to be and not waiting for them as kind of passive service delivers. In 2020, some major things happened, and we'll talk all about what major things happened that year. But 2019 queued us up. It was the first year we got rid of fines and fees, and actually that's to all of your credit in the room. I was not here yet. It's a major feat for libraries to do that, to say, you know what, this is a harmful practice. We are creating more barriers rather than helping them. And truly, it's a drop in the bucket compared to how much goodwill and how much return service we could experience. So off of the heels of 2019 and going fine and fee free, we hosted barrier-free workshops at DPL. This was my predecessor, Holly and Sarah Thompson led them. And really what we were looking for is, now that we have this mindset of we can reduce barriers and change our service, what else could we do? And so DPL staff themselves very vocally identified that a traditional desk model, as you see above, which is the downtown Bend Library before many rearrangements, they basically established that the desk model is one physical barrier to library usage, and then there are more. What I want to give you all is just a snapshot into those workshops, and it's a little messy. Bear with me, we may have to decipher some handwriting. One of the things we saw is questions like, do we even need big bulky desks at all? We saw enthusiasm around mobility, around accommodating things and being able to roll things around. So movable bookshelves and desks and roll things around to accommodate everything mobile. And hopefully we'll talk a little bit about how we've been witnessing it and living in it now with Sisters in La Pine. A couple other statements we heard is just no desks. And I promise you that DPL does not have animosity towards desks, but we really do look at what it looks like for us to sit down and our customers to be forced to come to us and ask. And we really want to be engaged, open partners instead of sitting ducks waiting for folks to come to us. And then the last one, which I think summarizes the magic of all of these ideas and the generation we had, is we could go to customers. And again, that idea of we don't wait, we are proactive and we are welcoming first. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about the transition because it was fabulous ideas and DPL was ahead of their time, but it still takes a lot of work. I think to Greg's credit, he's behind here. The redistribution of the public use square footage is the biggest thing. And I think La Pine is a true testament to that. And the later half of the grand opening, after folks have left and the rest of the community trickled in, we had someone come in and they go, "Where's your desk?" And we go, "Oh no, we help you from here." And we pointed to our Ergotron cart and she looks around, she goes, "It looks like you have way more books now." And I could not have said anything better myself. We are more than just books, but that is a phenomenal place for them to start and discover that we care about the thing that brought them in maybe, or that our space is for them. So we were able to increase our collection and truly make the full use of our community living room back to the public. So it does require redistribution, which really isn't possible without the bond project. It would be one, a lot more expensive, and two, a lot more daunting. So I think this just kind of starts showing how our bond project efforts and now our philosophical efforts are kind of married together and pointing us down the clear path that we are on. The next part is for our staff. It really does not force us, but really encourages us to continue on the path that Todd started, but didn't quite get right the first time, and find those flexible mobile technology and tools. So we now employ the use of tablets, of Ergotron carts. One of the beautiful things is that we have been on a long search for it. And in fact, it's one of the fun things where we sort of stumped our architects. We had them on the search for creating something, but actually we found an item that's already on the market and that we can purchase. And we had a long laundry list of requirements for this item. It had to accommodate seating and standing. It had to accommodate someone as short as me, or 5'1.5", all the way to somebody who's way past 6 foot. And we actually found it. So the technology is there. And thankfully we've been tracking it. And now, to Todd's credit, what you set out for several years ago, we are now living in the reality where it exists. Another part of it is creating options of choice so that both staff and customers have the empowered ability to offer each other choices on how they want to be served or how we want to deliver service. Something that Sara Brang queued up several times for me, which I'm so grateful, is myself and Sarah Thompson are leading a customer service team. And that team was formed with a lot of intentionality. It's a large team. It is 13 out of our 101 staff members. So it's about 10% of DPL, a little bit over 10% of DPL. And it is a cross section of all areas, all branch representation. And that was not an error. We were seeking staff members who were very passionate about service, but who would represent their branch's voice and their branch's experience, and then create dialogue back and forth between this committee, and the people who are enacting all of the vision of the committee. So that team has been, typically your teams are about 1 year, but this is intentionally a 2-year team. So we're about at our halfway point. And we are starting now to divide and conquer and look at our practices and our policies. But first we started with the physicality. And then the last part is this does kind of push us into learning, into more learning and really taking advantage of more growth opportunities. So I think the in-service lessons that you all have heard about, all of it builds up together and all of it creates this wide curriculum of this journey that DPL is on, from the bond product to our service model to even just our day-to-day practices on how we trust each other. All right, now I'm gonna stop talking a little bit, I promise. I just want to show you all examples of it in action, both in and out of our building, because I do think the pictures will give much more words than what I have the capability for. We have examples from Sisters and here in La Pine. And one thing to highlight is we have our staff member, Denise, just again, side by side with the customer, no divide, really breaking down that power dynamic of we are partners together, side by side, not adversarial, sitting across from each other. And then even our partners who come on in onto the right, you'll see one of our translators, and even she's encouraged to follow our point of need service model. So we are all in and really trying to make the most of working together in community. The next one is just kind of a side-by-side comparison. And again, like I said, when you hit director level, all fair game, you are target to any kind of example. We have just kind of the difference of what our old buildings in Sister looked like to now what it looks like to be able to respond immediately and be in the library together. I'll tie together some of what Rhea shared a little bit earlier is one thing we have going on just in the general world is the loneliness epidemic. And I truly think that her project, taking it out of our building and meeting people who are living through that and need connection, is living this point of need service. Again, it would be lovely if they came into our beautiful buildings, but also sometimes we've got to take the first step and find them first. And then as she showed herself, they do come back in, which is wonderful. Something she did hint at, and the reason I pair these two together is this over here on the right-hand side is the image of when a car hits your building and you don't know what to do. Sometimes you have to do temporary service and meet folks where they are. So we heard that the activity center had lunches and we realized that's a big draw. They also had bingo. So we strategically paired ourselves during those bingo hours, knowing that our community was there, knowing that there was a hunger need, and knowing that there was also a fun reason to go there. They were very kind and invited me to many bingo sessions, and I should have gone, but I was like, no, I've got to watch the library. I'll get there. Truly, again, we meet our community where they are, regardless of what happens when they are in crisis or when we ourselves and our buildings or our temporary spaces are in crisis as well. A couple others, because I really want to highlight that this doesn't just extend to the outward service. We are very much each other's customers. And one thing I'm very proud of, aside from one staff member you see present, none of them are working out of buildings that they traditionally work in, but they have gone to help they've gone above and beyond to help their colleagues. And so we are truly living it through and through. We don't just think we deliver and meet our customers where they are, we meet each other. And so I think it really shows, it really says something to show that it is permeating through all areas of our organization, that we're trying to build those connections within each other. A fun story I can share on the right-hand side, we have Sara, Brang, and Tina Davis, two of our managers, who this was, again, I could probably show you only photos in crisis. This was during the Sisters water pipe burst. Oh. And so I had about 30 minutes to do a check-in meeting with the staff to see how they were doing, to update them on progress. And Tina and Sara stepped in with about 5 minutes of training. They processed our customers' holds, and it was truly so that we could reopen with curbside services. So without them being flexible enough and meeting us where we are in the moment of crisis, I could not have had that touch point meeting with the staff to get the green light that they were confident that we could reopen services to our customers. So truly, again, that we are living it through and through, and I'm so grateful to watch even our team, watch this concept resonate to our team, to each other. And then again, a couple more examples. Again, Sara Brang was a huge help during that pipe burst, and she came in locally. She goes, "Look, Mayra, I learned how to process." I'm so proud. A couple other photos you see is our librarians going to Battle of the Books offsite, trying to meet people where they are, meet our kiddos at the programs that mean a lot to them. And then we have an offsite program as well. And we see that I just want to highlight how much of a diversity in age and family members that come to our programs. We truly are a multi-generational experience. And I think that that's something to be said when we can go out into the community and still provide what we provide in building, wherever truly we can provide it. The last couple ones I want to show you is sometimes point of need service model even takes you to dancing side by side your community. This is at Hugh Hartman in Redmond. And hopefully it looks familiar. We have
see if I can see any of my family.
Are you in there?
You were there. You don't see us.
Oh, well, next time I'm gonna pull you on the dance floor with us. We have Diana, our Latino services community librarian, and so our bilingual community librarian. And this was an event at Dia de los Niños, Dia de los Libros. And I heard a beautiful reflection from another community librarian that day. And she goes, I hadn't quite experienced a space for Latino children to be themselves. She goes, I heard every language. I heard Spanglish, English, Spanish. And she goes, they were themselves. They were dancing with their teachers. They were dancing with Diana. And she goes, it's just beautiful to see moments where they can truly come together. And again, I hope that this can happen in our buildings coming up soon. But sometimes we've got to go out first, break the ice, assure them that we are safe, we are welcoming to them, and that we are willing to do it. And we're committed to this work. And again, truly, when you're a director, you get to be picked on. Todd also joined us on the dance floor. So here he is doing one of the very fast line dances that exist in the Latino community. So you weren't safe, Todd.
Yeah, and I can't line dance.
But you were doing it.
He is very committed. Actually, in that day, this was Todd's break. He helped myself and several of our managers serve food to the community in the moment, and that was something that we also found a high value. One of the reasons I highlight this event is unfortunately the following day, for the exact same things we were doing in a very sacred space, there was a bias crime for the exact same thing in Redmond. So there was musicians playing, and the musicians that had been invited to play at the county fair were attacked with stones and received some physical injuries. Yeah. And so I think one thing it reminds us is that no matter what happens in the community, there are always opportunities for us to build those bridges and connections and say, we are a safe space, we are purveyors of that safe space, and there's still work to do. And I think for us, it's a constant reminder we do have to continue that growth, because it does feel 10 times harder to experience that as a community when you just the day before were dancing side by side with your happy library director. And so we've got some work at DPL to continue making sure that there's a consistent and always welcoming message to our communities, no matter what community is, and that we're still meeting them at their point of need. So with that, I will stop talking and take any reflections or discussion or questions that you all have.
I was going to tell you that we had a science fair, not a science fair, but a science STEM meeting at the Sisters Elementary, and somebody from the library was there, and they had the coolest science stuff they brought. It was so much fun. I spent way too much time there. It was my job.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
Yes,
I really am.
Right.
I might steal you for that little snippet. I love a good reflection, and I love a good quote that I can give. So thank you for sharing that.
I have a question about desks. I would imagine that for many individuals, a desk is a point of reference and alerts you as to where to go if you need something. So how have you made it so that an individual walking in the library will know, like, the thing that they've always known as far as, and the way to get their information is gone, how do they find that new version of that?
Yeah, no, that's a phenomenal question. And I think that's something that we have had round and round discussions about ongoing. And our kind of response to it, or our way to combat that, is twofold. One, we do have a set service point that tends to stay in a single location so that folks know to expect. It can move around, which is beautiful, because if the staff member deems that they need to go somewhere, they can. It's also, we've gotten really good at wrapping our objects with DPL logoing and stylization. So it has been an effort with kind of our branding and marketing approach. How do we how do we create something that's identifiable? And then the second part of this is the part of the work through the customer service team is staff themselves have identified, hey, we want something that makes us more identifiable. And it could be as silly as a top hat or something a little more practical, like detail logo wear, that some staff have asked for, or maybe even something that we consistently wear out together. And so instead of making the big broad decision and having it be a mandate from above or from Todd or myself, we're instead invoked the help of that customer service team and asked them, what would be most practical and realistic for you all? And what are you observing that our customers actually need? Is it a bright colored object? Not that I want to do what everybody in highlighter yellow. However, there's something to be said for folks who have any kind of sight deficiency or sight struggle could benefit from a high contrast item against a different contrast color. And so all of those are factors that we wanted to have our staff at the steering wheel and really advocating for their customers where they see the need. And so I can't say I have 100% answer, but we started with our look and feel because we absolutely want to make sure our brand is through the vision that our marketing and branding kind of department have. And then the flip side is let's put the staff members at the driver's seat so that we can create something that benefits them the most. That's a great question because that does come up quite a bit.
I bet.
And the subject of our next employee advisory committee.
Oh, yeah.
What people would like to see.
Yeah. We absolutely don't work in a silo. All of our in-service themes and our EAC topics are all working together. And my ask of Todd was, bring it to EAC, the Employee Advisory Committee. Please let them know that information is going to go straight to that customer service committee. It's being spearheaded, it's a subcommittee, but it's being spearheaded by staff themselves. This is where I get to have a little bit of hands off and get a couple hours out of my day back, and they make the decisions and share it. So I think it speaks to kind of our just the ongoing conversations, and nothing happens in a silo. And I think that to me, that's the biggest thing we could do to work towards a culture of trust.
And it seems like we're really learning from experience as these new branches come online, and because we're seeing in smaller spaces what questions and problems customers might have in identifying where to go, and then those translate into the larger buildings, and staff has an opportunity to talk about that amongst themselves because they may have concerns or worries. And somebody that's gone through it already can say, oh, well, no, that's not a problem, but this might be, or whatever the answer is. It's really a good team building thing, I would think.
Yeah, I think somewhere in there, my hidden motivation is we are creating DPL's future leaders. My goal is always succession planning because one day I hope to retire. But I think that engaging them in those decision-making dialogues now can really cue them up for, oh, we know all the factors that go into a decision. It's not just an arbitrary decision. But thank you for highlighting that. That's exactly the intent of it.
Right. It's just tremendous work. I mean, from gathering all the contacts and history, moving it through the organization's history and then into the future is really inspirational. And it's just really, thank you for all of what all of you are doing. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Thank you for being in person.
Yes. I just get to be the loudmouth that takes on Todd at meetings. He's very gracious. Any other questions or reflections I can take back as well? That I guess that is another ask of you all. I can share if you all ever have feedback that you would like to share with us. It's a two-way street as well.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think that it's this barrier-free initiative has so many different aspects to it, and that's exactly the stuff I believe that the board and the district need to focus on, like what are the barriers to use, because everyone is paying for this and everyone needs to benefit from our libraries, so identifying those factors is key. Yeah. And then we've got all these good creative minds figuring out solutions to reducing.
With lots of enthusiasm and energy.
Exactly.
Greatly appreciated.
Yes. So thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
No,
with that, I will not take another second.
Thank you for your enthusiasm.
Okay.
So for the monitoring report, first thing I have to say is in the last year, I have done direct public service for 1 hour. And I got my picture taken. Yeah, I'm not milking that one picture.
I'm glad you weren't in your shark costume.
No, I'd be more. So again, this is the treatment of library customers. This is, you've had a chance to read it. And I really asked Mayra to come because my answers to these are very specific and boring, and it doesn't reflect what we're really doing working with customers. But in my opinion, we are in compliance with the district's treatment of library customers' executive elimination policies, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, anyone?
The only thing I would ask, I know during COVID, we had some problems with people being a little more abusive and.
Yes.
Has that settled out a bit?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, because I get alerts every time we have an incident report, and during COVID, it was like 3 to 5 a day across the district.
Oh my God.
And people were very angry when we were trying to enforce masks. And now it is, it's back to where it was before, which maybe once a week, there's something that's happening. Dealing with the public, there's always something. But yes, it is definitely gone down. Thank goodness, because that was a tough time.
Any other questions? Yeah, I would entertain a motion.
I move that the library is in compliance with the executive, executive limitation policies.
Got it. That's 3-1.
3-1.
Go ahead. Oh, second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. She passes. All right, do we have some library meetings, Todd?
Just some quick ones. I did send out an email this afternoon about a public meeting training that Special Districts is doing. It is an online training. A couple of you, probably hands, have already done some online, and it's pretty easy to get in there. Getting it set up might take a bit, and Lori can help with that. But if we all take that training, we get 2% off on our insurance, which is significant. So we really encourage you to do that. The other side of that is there's a new Oregon statute requiring board members to take public meeting training. The weird thing is that's why special districts develop this training to meet that requirement. And then as the, hopefully nobody from the state's listening, as the state works, they have at this point not accepted that training as meeting that requirement. At the same time, the state has not developed any training to meet that requirement. So my assumption is eventually they will accept that training. So there's kind of a twofold reason for you to take it. Plus, it's interesting to know what we can and can't do for public meeting law.
It's important training to have.
So I encourage you to do that. And
is there a deadline?
That yeah, we need to have it done by October 31st. So we have time. Oh, in your, I forgot to get it in your packet. I handed out to you. This is the list of all the checks and ACH payments that we made in July. As you know, we switched to a different system. We're still working with that. So thank you for board members are still looking at and electronically signing the checks. The goal with this, there's no approval needed. It's more for your information as a board member to be able to look and say, what are some of these things? So, and feel free to send any questions to me or Robert. If you have any based on this, and in the future, we'll have this out to you before the board meeting in case there are any questions that people want to ask at the board meeting. So, oh, and the last thing I wanted to say, it's around these buildings, we talked a lot about what we're trying to accomplish with the building, but that getting all the mechanical equipment and plumbing set up, a really big piece that we talked about was we wanted a place where our community could go when there's smoke everywhere and there's no way to get away from it. It's in your house, it's outside. And unfortunately, we're testing it now, but really excited to say that anecdotally, the Lapine staff has had a lot of smoke in the last month and a half. And they're really pleased with the fact that we have very fresh air in the buildings. It's doing a really great job of scrubbing out that smoke. And that's a piece that I'm excited about for all of our libraries. So it's an unfortunate piece that I remember about 3 or 4 years ago, we were talking about the need to do that. We were interviewing architects. It was smoky. Kind of twofold, especially when you get into Redmond, you'll see the whole building is designed where the air comes from the floor and moves up, which it makes it much more healthy, and it's scrubbing out the smoke. So it's doing well.
That's great.
Yeah, and those are my updates. Yeah.
Thank you. So Betsy, do you have kind of a double dip here as far as the foundation and your
yeah, let's see, as far as the foundation, when we met last month, it was very housekeeping type thing. So nothing very exciting to report. We recognized Jarrell moving into the president position, and that's it for foundation. And let's see, also, Anne suggested that I share a little bit about the virtual conference that took place last month, put on by United for Libraries. And there were 3 different days to attend. I just attended the board day, and I think I participated in many of the classes. I don't know if it was most or many, but there was a session called Trustees' Role in Culture Wars, which was really interesting. And one of the key takeaways I got from that was that we have a role in resisting misinformation or addressing misinformation with the people that we talk to and that sort of thing. There was another session about how libraries can participate in readying the community for voting and just kind of promoting that. And then what I thought was the most interesting session was about succession strategies for a board and how to prepare potential and qualified candidates, making a list of what the board needs, what does the board reflect the community, considering holding a board assessment on a regular basis, maybe annual or so to discuss current composition, such as demographics, community connections, professional skills, talking about the experience that the board has or potential skill gaps that is being observed, or do we over or underrepresent areas? So I thought that was really very interesting and useful topic. And so it was a very, very well put on conference. I wasn't sure at first, virtual conference, but they did a really great job. So
it's a great organization. Yeah, and I thank you for attending, and thank you for bringing this back to us, and especially well, in all of these areas. I think that's part of what we are going to touch on through the work session that we have and are planning with Margot, because I envision it as being more than one work session. But we have an opportunity to look at some things like this and say, is this something that the board wants to spend some time on discussing? And I think it was really valuable effort there. So we can kind of define goals for ourselves as a board of ways that we want to move the board forward and maybe address some issues that we haven't addressed in the past or want to revisit given a new composition of a new board. So, I mean, I think we have some great opportunities there. So thank you a lot, Betsy. That's great. Have we identified any critical communications that Todd needs to?
No, our big critical communication is going to be the opening of the Sun River Library. As soon as we are open, we have a press release ready to go out, letting everybody know. We definitely plan on a quiet opening just to get staff a chance to go there, but we will be live next week. So there we go.
That's so exciting. Okay, self-review of the meeting. Bunny, do you want to start?
Sure. I thought it was a great meeting, lots of information from Greg, I appreciate that. And I always love the education. I feel like every time we have one of those presentations, I learned so much that I had no idea about the library and what it does, which I communicate to people. And so it's a good meeting. Appreciate it.
All right. Betsy?
I would say that I appreciated our education topics in that they, a couple of them have given me just some concepts to consider and possibly do some more research on, so that I can continue to increase my understanding in support of the work that's being done here.
And
Greg, really appreciated your presentation of going back through the budget and just really looking at that. And I found that very helpful, especially where you looked at where we're saving some money and then, you know, all of that. And I really liked your comment that you feel very comfortable that we're in a good spot moving forward. And Mayra, thank you so much for yours. I did have some questions on point of service. And your presentation answered that for me. So thank you. I did want to bring up, I've noticed in the bulletin that they put weekly schedules of public meetings and the library is not listed there. Is that something? Yeah, so I don't know if that's something we want to look at, but because we are a public meeting, and it just says the date and the time.
Yeah, we'll get them that. We do let them know. They used to do it and I haven't been checking them, so.
Yeah, I haven't.
I've noticed a couple other public meetings that are missed too. So I don't know if they only are choosing what the county and the city maybe.
I don't know, but thanks for the alert because they've been doing it so consistently. We stopped checking.
It might be a space consideration on their part that they're devoting fewer inches to it.
Yeah. Even online though.
Yeah. Oh, that's
true.
Oh, yeah.
It's missing online too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know.
We do send out the notice though every month to the bulletin. So
well, maybe
we'll
there's
check with them and see why we're not.
Just curious. Thanks for bringing that. Okay, Erin.
All right. I agree with the value of these education portions. I feel like I'm learning a lot and it's exciting to see the benefits of these programs. Thrilled to hear that our turnover rate is so low and has been stable. Very exciting work on the strategic operations and goals and objectives. I'm excited to see that continue. Yeah, good meeting.
I would echo what everyone has to say. I thought I continue to enjoy the education pieces a lot because I think this is such a dynamic organization that there's always new things to learn and hearing the enthusiasm of the staff just is inspiring. It fires me up to know how much the staff is excited about the work they're doing. And because it translates into great service to the public. So I love that portion of it. I appreciate Greg's detail as always, because he turns the barely comprehensible into the comprehensible for us, which I appreciate. And I think I think that the strategic planning effort, I really appreciate the fact that we hear about that on a regular basis. So that we know what progress is being made, because the staff works hard to put that together, and I would like to see the board have appropriate involvement in that process. So that we're really on the same page as staff and knowing what their priorities are, and they know what our priorities are, so that we can work together more effectively. I don't think that linkage has always been super strong, and I think it can get better. And I think this coming year will be a great year to work with. So that's what I've got. Todd?
No, I echo everything you all said. It's inspiring for me to have these educational presentations. And kind of building on what you said, that's one piece that I'm kind of excited to, I've been holding off and bringing the board to the in-service days, because what I would really love to do is to be able to have you there talking about the vision you have for what direction we're going. So that can be a really interactive piece for people. And I think coming out of the work sessions we have, we'll be in good shape for that.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? If that is the case, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
We're now to find out back down.